How's everybody doing today? Today we're going to be disassembling and cleaning my Glock 19. It's a pretty simple process, but I figured I should make a video on it nonetheless. The first step in any cleaning procedure, I've said it before in my other video that I've made, you always make sure the weapon's clear before you do anything with it. So you do that by removing the magazine, which is already out, and then visually and physically inspecting the chamber to make sure it's clear. And this one is, so it is safe to work on. Okay, like I said at the start, Glocks are a very simple gun. There's not a whole lot to them as far as disassembly goes. The first step in the process, like I said before, was make sure the weapon's clear. That involves removing the magazine and checking the chamber. After that, you do have to dry fire Glock to disassemble it. So I'll point it in the safe direction and dry fire it. And then what I call this is the Glock grip. You basically wrap your thumb around the back of that and wrap your fingers over the top of the slide and just cheat the slide back ever so slightly. And then pull down the tabs at the front and the slide comes out the front of the gun. Then you can remove your recoil spring and barrel, and that is a basic field strip on a Glock. Like I said before, it's not hard at all. It's a very easy process, toolless. Now you want to look at all your parts to make sure nothing's broke, damaged, worn, anything like that, just like you do with every gun. And this one happens to be pretty stinking dirty. It's been quite some time since I've actually cleaned this one. So we are going to do a complete disassembly of this today and throw a bunch of the small parts in my ultrasonic that I just got. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. Okay, the first thing I start with on every pretty much cleaning process that I do is the barrel. I like to get that soaking before I work on any of the other smaller parts. Okay, after you got the barrel chalked up in the vise, get yourself a cleaning rod. I am a fan of Tipton cleaning rods. They use a composite shaft that doesn't mar up any part of the bore when you're cleaning. It also has a nice bearing mounted handle with a through shaft all the way to the end. So if you get something that's tight, you can lightly tap the end of this to get it to go through. And then I have a bunch of pre-cut patches here that I will just wrap around. Actually, okay. Now I put my cleaning solvents and oils in a couple small needle oilers. Makes them easier to apply where you need them. In this case, I'm just going to put some solvent right on my brush and then run it through the bore. And get it good wetted down. And then that can sit there until we are ready to run patches through it. The rest of the firearm is actually remarkably easy to take apart as well. All Glocks, except the new Gen 5s that just came out, and the early Glocks up to Gen 2, I believe, have 3 pins in the frame. So you have your upper pin, lower pin, and then your backstrap pin. Now all 3 of these pins hold something in place inside the firearm. The upper pin here was added in the Gen 3 guns to increase the strength of the recoil system inside it. I don't know why they removed it again in the Gen 5s, but it's neither here nor there. Now, to remove the subassembly out of the gun, which includes all the trigger mechanism and the disconnector and the sear release and all that stuff out of there, you remove the 3 pins. From what I've experienced, it doesn't really matter which order you do it in. But Pins should generally be driven out right to left, which is what I'm doing here. Okay, that small pin's out. Now I can move on to the larger one. It shouldn't take too much doing, but it can prove to be a little tough. And then after you remove the big pin, your slide stop should slip right out. I would go ahead and pull it out and retain it right there. And it'll hold itself in place until you pull it out. So before you do that, take a good look at how it interfaces with the rest of the assembly so you know how to put it back in when it comes that time. Now the other one, the back pin is plastic that is also used to hold your different grips on if you so choose. Now comes the recoil block and the trigger assembly. Now that is pretty much as far as I usually take it. You can go to the trouble of trying to do more. You can pull the magazine release button out, and you can pull the takedown lever assembly out. I don't usually bother with it because I don't see the need. They're just not really, there's not any necessity to taking those apart, and there's not anything you really gain by taking them apart, which is the more important thing, I would think. So now these parts can be taken apart even further. Like anything else, check over, especially on the trigger and stuff, and make sure nothing looks too worn or anything like that, because that stuff can wear out. On this particular lever, you kind of have to twist it, and just like this, when it's in place, and eventually it'll come out. It takes a little bit of trying to do, I guess. Pay attention to which way it loops, so it sits properly back in there. The same thing when we took apart the spring off of this part. Pay attention to what way the spring went on there. This particular went over. Like that. So just pay attention to those little things, so you don't run into issues when you're going back together or taking it apart again, or functionality wise. The recoil guide spring and rod. I wouldn't recommend taking that apart at all. Just leave it like that, and either spray it down with some cleaner and then hose it off with air, or let it dry, or if you've got an ultrasonic cleaner, use it. Those are all real simple methods to clean that. I'm actually probably going to throw the whole frame in the ultrasonic as well, because it'll fit, so why not get all the powder residue out of it. Okay, now for the slide. There's a couple things to think about here. Nothing that's too difficult again. Okay, now we're going to take apart the slide. It's pretty simple. Right where your striker contact is, there's a little sleeve right there that you push down on. And then the back plate slides straight off the bottom. And then carefully release the striker, and it comes out. And then you have another pin for your ejector or extractor that comes right out of the side there. Okay, there comes the extractor. Usually they just fall out. Sometimes you have to take something behind the extractor itself and just give it a little pop. And the extractor comes out along with the plunger that goes right here in the frame that acts as both a safety for the striker and a lock for the extractor. Both those parts will go into the the ultrasonic as well. And then that is a pretty well stripped slide. You can take the extractor apart further, or you can take the striker apart further if you wish. I don't recommend it unless something needs replaced or repaired. Okay, since you guys have been gone, I ran all my parts to the ultrasonic cleaner except for the barrel. The barrel I scrubbed by hand, as I was showing earlier. I just finished patching it out and giving a good coat of oil on the bore and the exterior. A couple things to pay attention to. Right in here, you can get some buildup of gunk where your recoil spring sits on the feed ramp. You always want to make sure that's good and clean, and there's no weird wear marks or anything like that. Everything else I put in the ultrasonic, including the frame. If you have access to one of those, they're really nice. Brownells actually has a pretty small model available for not very much money. It's pretty handy for stuff like this, or small parts on anything. With a pistol, it's nice because you can get everything in there, including the frames and sides and everything. So now that everything's been cleaned, everything needs a good coat of oil on it to prevent corrosion. So we're going to go ahead and put a coat of oil on it, everything, and then reassemble. And I just use red shop rag for most of my oil application. You can use them for quite some time without having to go through a bunch of paper towels. Okay, once you've got all your parts oiled up, you can start reassembling. First thing I'm probably going to do is put the frame back together. So that involves the trigger bar and disconnector. And like I said before, you should have paid attention to how this spring went into place. So it goes back correctly. And there is kind of a little bit of finagling that has to happen for that to go back in. Okay, that's in place. Once your trigger assembly is in place, you can put your recoil block back in. I do this first so I can get this small pin back in the top. They're not directional. Just try to even it out on each side. And then you can slip your slide stop back in, and the spring for the slide stop rests underneath the recoil pin, which is why I put the block and the pin in there first, so it's easier to finagle into place. After that, you can take your large pin, which doesn't take force. If it's not going in, wiggle your slide stop around until it goes all the way through. It should go in by hand pressure only. And you can take a little punch and just center it. Check the function of your trigger. Everything's working. Slide stop's working. Set that off to the side. Now we can put the slide back together. Okay, so the first thing on the slide, we're going to go ahead and put the ejector or the extractor back into place, which only goes in one way. It should be pretty obvious where it goes. Drop that plunger back in, and that should hold the extractor in there for now. And then take your rod from the back and push it into place. And then take your striker, slide it in, and then you got your back plate. And the best way I can tell you to do this is to start it very lightly, and then a lot of people will use a punch to hold down on that. I don't find the need to. I can use my fingers. If you need to, you can take a decent sized punch and push back on that plastic collar on the striker to push it back into place. And then you will need a punch for the rod up here at the corner that's still sticking out to push it until it clears, and then you'll hear a snap and you're good to go. Now you can take some grease on Glocks and most pistols and a lot of bolt assemblies and slides. I tend to use a little bit of grease, more than most people do. I think it provides a little bit better protection long term than simple oil. And this grease seems to last up pretty good for cold weather, and use it sparingly, obviously. But you'll want it in 4 spots. So if you can see here, there's rail, 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 rail. That's where you want to match it on the slide. So if you need to, just hold that up there and put your grease right where the rails are. In those 4 locations. And then when you operate the weapon, it will naturally spread itself out to where it needs to be. And it doesn't take much, just a little bit. I just think it makes the action work a little bit better. Now something like this, it's not likely that you're going to be shooting in below 0 temperatures anyway. And if you are, you take that into consideration, but most people don't. Then you drop your barrel back in, recoil rod and spring, and that is ready to put back on the frame. And you simply just slide it back, run it all the way back, and you're back together. It's just that easy. Now after every time I have a gun apart, I do a functions check on it. The ideal way to do it would be with snap caps. I don't have any of those here. Dry firing is kind of a dispute within the industry. I don't really see the problem with it, especially when on certain firearms I don't see a problem with it, especially when Glock themselves tell you to dry fire the weapon to take it apart. Now, I'm not saying you need to do that 100 times a day. But for a simple functions check, it's perfectly okay in my opinion. Now, even though I know I just put this back together, I know it's empty, you always check before you do anything with it. So pull the slide to the rear, lock it, visually, physically inspect, it's clear, safe direction. Everything's working like it should. And that is pretty much it. The only other thing to put back in would be the pin in the rear of the gun, which is right there. And you are back together and ready to go. Glock is not a hard gun to disassemble. It is pretty simple, only requires a couple of tools. Just punches and a hammer. Like I said before, you can use basic cleaning methods to clean them. You can use an ultrasonic, whatever you have available to you. So that has been my instructions on how to disassemble and clean a Glock 19. And this procedure works for every Glock that I can think of off the top of my head that's Gen 2 or higher, except the Gen 5 stuff that's new. The Gen 5 stuff, like I said before, they take that top pin out of the equation. So it'd be slightly different, but not much. The little 42 and 43 single stack Glocks, those also don't have a top pin and are arranged just a slight bit different. But overall, if you can take apart one of them, you can take apart all of them. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.